The Babylon Project was our last best hope for Scott. A self-contained podcast, 1 hour long, located on the internet. A place of fun and discussion for Babylon 5 fans everywhere. A shining beacon in cyberspace, all alone in the night. It was the dawn of the 20th anniversary of Babylon 5, the year the Great War to free Bab 5 came upon us all. This is the story of the last of the Babylon podcasts. The year is 2014. The name of the place is the Babylon Project Podcast.
This is Maggie Egan, your ISN news anchor, and you're listening to the Babylon Project podcast. Thanks for listening.
Hi there, Babylon 5 fans. This is Raul and Jim, and you are listening to the Babylon Project podcast again. How are you doing today, Jim?
Doing very well. Got some good episodes to talk about.
Oh, yeah. We are going to be hitting what is truly a fan favorite today in Babylon Squared.
Yep.
This is an episode that's just, well, what can you say? It stands on its own in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Though there are plenty of questions raised. It is probably the biggest arc episode that we have had yet. It's one of the most important episodes in the series as a whole, and it introduces one of the most loved guest stars on the show.
Yes.
I mean, it's like, wow, what all can you say about this thing?
It's got a lot. There's a lot to it. What starts out looking like another, oh boy, here we go with another time travel episode in another series, turns out to be very important.
This is, let's give us a summary, and then we'll get into this.
All right, here we go.
Archive. Access. Initiated.
A Star Fury pilot who has been investigating some strange reading calls in from Sector 14. He sees something that is a surprise to him when suddenly his ship is surrounded by a bright light. Ivanova, who is monitoring the situation in the CNC, tries to re-establish communications with the pilot, but has no success. With the Star Fury returning to the station, Sinclair speculates that due to all the tachyon interference in the sector, the pilot has lost communication with the station. Soon, the Star Fury arrives back at Babylon 5, but there are no life signs on board. After checking into the situation, Garibaldi reports to Sinclair that the pilot appeared to have died from old age, despite that he was only 30 years old. During the investigation, it was found that the pilot apparently scratched B4 on the buckle of his safety harness before he died. Sinclair further notes that the tachyon emissions from the sector are coming from the exact place that Babylon 4 was before it disappeared. When a distress call is received from Babylon 4's commander, Major Krantz, asking for help with evacuation of the station, Sinclair decides to lead a rescue mission, even though the message was time-stamped 4 years in the past. Sinclair leads a group of ships into Sector 14, where Babylon 4 appears in front of them. Telling the other pilots to stay behind until they know it is safe, Sinclair and Garibaldi board Babylon 4, where they are greeted by a raving crew member who wants them off the station. Garibaldi subdues the crewman and Major Krantz steps forward. Suddenly, after a flash of light, Sinclair finds himself in the middle of a firefight. He doesn't know what is happening, but Garibaldi is with him in riot gear and apparently does know what is happening. Garibaldi tells Sinclair that the station has been rigged to explode and that he should leave right away. Then there is another flash and Sinclair finds himself back on Babylon 4. Krantz explains that Sinclair has been through a flash in time that takes people either forward or backward in time randomly, then tells Sinclair that they must get off the station. With the evacuation underway, Sinclair and Garibaldi are taken to see Zathras, an alien who appeared on the station in a flash of light. Upon seeing Sinclair, Zathras seems to know Sinclair, but then dismisses him, saying that he is not the one. After a few terse words from Garibaldi, Zathras talks, telling him that he is following someone known as the One, and that he, Zathras, would be willing to die for the One. Zathras further explains that he and others that are with him have arrived to steal the station and take it through time to serve as a base for a terrible war. After Sinclair and the others are called away to another situation, Zathras manages to escape, and in a corridor nearby, a figure in a spacesuit materializes, and when Zathras sees him, he calls him the One. The person in the spacesuit is obviously in pain and reaches out to Sinclair. When Sinclair touches a spacesuited figure, he is thrown across the corridor. Zathras rushes forward and hands an object to the person in the suit and says that he has fixed it. The space-suited person disappears. Zathras then tries to escape but is caught and has been taken back to the interrogation room. Meanwhile, as Garibaldi works to get everyone off the station, Sinclair asks Zathras what he gave the person in the spacesuit. Zathras explains that it is a time stabilizer and that without it he, Zathras, will die. Garibaldi calls Sinclair to tell him that he is almost finished with the evacuation and then experiences a time flashback to when he was arguing with Lise Hampton just before departing to work on Babylon 5. When he returns to the present, Garibaldi is even more determined to get off of Babylon 4. Sinclair and Krantz prepare to leave the station and decide to take Zathras with them. Suddenly, a tremor loosens something above and Zathras is trapped under it. Sinclair stops to try to save him, but Zathras tells Sinclair that he must leave and face his own destiny. As Sinclair and Krantz leave, the space-suited person materializes again, and Zathras tells him that he knew he wouldn't leave him behind. Everyone else leaves the station. As Babylon 4 moves through time, the person in the spacesuit takes off his helmet, and it is revealed that it is a much older Sinclair. He talks to someone off-screen explaining how he tried to warn them, but everything happened the way he remembered. Whomever it was he was talking to, sounding like Delenn, tells him that it is time to go and that someone is waiting. In another storyline, Delenn leaves Babylon 5 in a shuttle and joins the Grey Council, of which she is a member, on a Minbari war cruiser. When the council convenes, she is welcomed and informed that she has been chosen to lead the council. While she is surprised and feels honored, she says that she must refuse, citing that prophecy states that her place is elsewhere. A member of the council tells her that prophecy will take care of itself and that she will not be returning to the station. She talks with another member of the council and tells him that she knows that if she goes back to the Great Hall, she will never leave again, and demands that the council reconvenes. When the Grey Council does reconvene, she explains that she must return to Babylon 5 because her work is not yet done there. The council tells her that if she leaves, she may not be allowed back, and that she might even become an outcast. After taking a vote, it is determined that Delenn will be allowed to continue her work on Babylon 5. As Delenn leaves the Minbari ship, her friend on the council gives her a triluminary telling her that if she is right about the prophecies, She will have a need of it in the future.
Character files opened.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Now we've got a basis to talk from.
Correct. So now let's get into the guest stars a little bit here.
Yes.
We'll start with, let's go backwards this time. Mark Hendrickson plays a character that they list as Grey Council number 2.
Number 2, that's the short round council member that we see periodically in and out of the show.
Right. Mark Hendrickson, he's the one. He's also has a name, but he's not given a name on the credits.
The tall gentleman with the staff that played Rothen wanted to be not included in the credits. It was actually his request. He wanted that character to remain more mysterious.
Oh, I see.
So it was actually by intent. Apparently, they weren't, legally required to, because it was a minor enough, it was a small enough role. It was minor enough role. So the union rules didn't require them to do it. So Straczynski was like, okay, fine. If you think it helps the character, they let him stay off the credits.
Oh, okay. Again, then we had Denise Gentile as Lise Hampton. We've discussed her before.
And she'll be back again.
And then Kent Broadhurst played Major Kranz.
Yeah, St. Louis boy, a fellow mule skinner.
Yeah, he'll reappear in future episodes, in one future episode called War Without End. That's
a few seasons down the road, and that's an episode we are going to. I know we're spoiler friendly, but you think we ought to call War Without End parts 1 and 2 off limits?
Yeah, we probably should.
Obviously, I know us. We'll make a few exceptions down the road, but...
Oh, yeah.
I was going to say, I'm going to leave that your call.
Okay. And then our very important character introduction of Zathras, played by Tim Choate.
Yeah, and that became one of the more beloved characters, as I say, of the series.
He'll be in 3 more episodes, but you know something? His presence on this show is so big in the 4 episodes that he is in. It just seems like there are more.
In each of the episodes that he is in, they are extremely pivotal episodes for the main story arc.
Yes.
So that's really where it comes from, and he when he read for the part, apparently he came up with the Zathras accent in the parking lot getting ready for it. So you listen to some of his conversation, past conversation. Unfortunately, he passed away in a motorcycle accident.
Yes.
One of the ways he has described the Zathras character, he added that by becoming chameleon-like, it became easier to take risks with his performances. Thus, he developed the character of Zathras in Babylon 5, a pivotal recurring role with full prosthetic makeup, which did much to illustrate the complex story between seasons 1 and 3. According to Choate, he channeled the accent of Zathras within minutes of the audition while waiting in the parking lot. Zathras was also played with a wonderful sense of humor, which endeared his character to audiences worldwide. And then, of course, they note that afterwards, this is from IMDb, that he had died as a result of a motorcycle accident on his way to a rehearsal.
Yeah, he what a presence in this show he was. He also appears in an episode of Crusade. Was in Dark Skies.
Not as Zathras, though.
No. Was in Dark Skies, and also another film called DEFCON 4 in 1985. Those are some of his science fiction credits.
And he was a very, very busy character actor, guest starring actor, and for very obvious reasons. The guy was just brilliant at his craft.
Yep.
Initiating plot analysis.
So, as we begin the episode, we get a continuation of something we figured out several episodes ago, and that is that Susan does not like mornings.
Nope. Oh gosh, the pranking on her. At first, I was like, okay, whose idea was this? Because it was Sinclair that started off changing the plates, but
Right.
it really became clear that it was Mike's idea.
Yeah. Well, and you notice Sinclair cleared out pretty fast.
Smart man.
Yeah. And Garibaldi's having way too much fun.
Yes. But everything gets sort of interrupted. Sinclair's called up. Was it Sinclair called up or was it Susan called up for the TACAN emissions?
I just watched it the other day, and
same here.
Remember.
Okay. No, it was Susan.
Okay.
Oh, I'm gonna be a blast today, Jim. My brain is still at half mast. Susan was called up early because of TACAN emissions being found, and for me that was first a red flag.
Right.
And then Sinclair was called up for them as well. TACAN emissions fast, inherently faster than light particle, or at least theoretical particle.
Mm-hmm.
Commonly connected with time travel. My honest thought when I first saw this episode was, oh gods, here we go again.
Yeah.
Time travel stories are not generally well done, in my opinion.
They can be either good or bad. There's a few good ones. It just depends.
On TV episodes, at least, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a few good ones.
It kind of depends on the purpose of them. For instance, Deep Space Nine did the time travel flashback episodes to The Trouble with Tribbles, which was a brilliant...
it was a technical masterpiece the way they integrated in.
Yeah.
But as a story, it was meh.
Yeah, I loved it.
Now, excluding Doctor Who.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Excluding Doctor Who. Honestly, in my opinion, the only great time travel story
mm-hmm.
in science fiction television has been, and you know what I'm going to say, you've got the coffee cup sitting in front of you. City on the Edge of Forever.
Yeah, it was definitely one of the better episodes of Star Trek and a really good time travel episode.
And I'm not talking about just Star Trek. I'm talking about sci-fi in general. It was really the only time travel story that I consider truly great.
But I could disagree and say Quantum Leap, the entire series, trumps everybody.
And it would have to be disagree. Unfortunately,
really,
I was not a big Quantum Leap fan.
I was running a theater when that was on TV, and I never got to see it. So I finally did get to see it when it was on reruns and on every day. So I dearly love that series.
I have never been able to really get into it. And, Straczynski himself was not a fan of time travel stories.
Right.
This was going to be his only tip back into time.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly because of all the paradox problems, all the nuances with time travel. It just makes it a mess. And for me, it just gets harder and harder to suspend disbelief. And City on the Edge of Forever was able to overcome all of my hesitations on time travel stories.
Yeah.
This was able to overcome all of my hesitation on time travel stories.
Yeah.
And there has been one other science fiction show that has been able to overcome my issues with time travel.
Mm-hmm.
And that has been Continuum.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can see that. However, this is not a time
This
travel
is not a time travel
podcast.
Nope,
this
but
is a
we can't.
Babylon 5 podcast.
Someone was talking to me once about doing a time travel podcast at one time. I don't remember if who it was. I'll have to dig around and see where that was going. But anyway, yes, we have our time travel tachyon anomaly in Sector 14. One of the Star Furies is flying out to investigate. It's 3 hours there, 3 hours back, and pretty much all we know about it before he shields his eyes and screams is that something impossible has appeared.
Yes. That part of the story drops off, and then we see Delenn in a shuttle alone, going somewhere.
To do something she must do, quote, alone.
And now, you think perhaps, we of course know that she's been summoned to go to the Grey Council.
Right.
Take her place as a member of that, and probably must do alone has something to do with her not wanting to reveal that generally.
Yeah, though, I wonder why she still wouldn't have had her aide with her, but...
Well, somebody has to stay behind and take care of affairs on Babylon 5. Plus, we need Lanier desperately in the next episode.
Yes.
So Lanier has to stay behind.
This actually starts off what is a very interesting side arc for Delenn that will not be fully resolved until season 4.
Yeah.
Her whole interaction and her affairs with the Grey Council is an important part of the major arc, but it's a side arc of its own.
Yes.
While she's sitting there waiting, our Star Fury comes back, and we find that the pilot has died of old age.
Yeah, old age. And he has left a hint about what he saw.
Scrawled into the belt buckle very deeply with something.
Yeah.
I'd like to know where he found the tool to do that.
Yeah, it looked like it was burnt in almost. Like a TIG welder or something did that. Yeah, he puts in there B4, of course, which is the missing station.
Mm-hmm.
And,
surprise!
Yeah.
Or not.
Well, and didn't they mention earlier in the episode that Sector 14 is the area where Babylon 4 had disappeared, so...
And it's been mentioned that Babylon 4 had just disappeared out of space and time. Right, just, completely disappeared, was a mystery. Before it could be, occupied right after it had gone online. Actually, within 24 hours of it going online.
Yeah.
So it's a big mystery, which is why I add the or not to the surprise.
Yeah, Thomas told us all about what happened, so he didn't know the reason, of course, for it. And then they call through, and it would appear that it has been a very short amount of time passed on Babylon 4 itself, while 4 years has passed for everyone away from Babylon 4. Which brings up a question in my mind. If only, say, minutes or hours has passed on Babylon 4, why would the pilot die of old age?
I think it is not just the crossing, and this is something that, comes up. Okay, here's where we're going to break our rule. But it's okay because in this case it's foreshadowed that Susan's going to be the one that goes back next time. At the end it's like, she says, Garibaldi's not going, I'm going.
Right.
I think it's not just the time flashes because everyone else got the time flashes, but getting caught in the tachyon burst.
Okay.
Right? That tachyon burst hit as he was in the area, so I think that probably had a little something to do with it. Okay.
So, we have Sinclair leaving us with a question, what if, that never gets answered. And yeah, don't you remember? He says, he looks at Susan and he says, what if? And then he doesn't get to finish it because he gets interrupted with the communication from Babylon 4. So I never did figure out the what if part of that, what that was supposed to be.
I suspect the what if turns out to be exactly what he got, because it turns out to be Babylon 4
Right.
calling. Though
They
that
lose-
conversation,
Oh, go ahead.
I think we're about to say. Oh, I think we're about to say the same thing. We lose communication, and Krantz is making this comment about it's starting again.
Right.
Now, speaking of unanswered questions,
Well, we don't find we will find out, but just not right away.
right?
So you mentioned that, of course we go back. Sinclair takes off. I'm not getting ahead of us here, are we?
No, not
Okay.
at all. Sinclair's going to. They're going to go, and they want to get the people off the. They want to get the people off the ship. They at least want to investigate. So yeah.
They need to evacuate everybody. We have a time travel episode within a time travel episode taking place here. It's really kind of neat the way everything folds up on itself.
Yes.
It's not just Garibaldi and Sinclair. They're leading a lot of ships to go and pick people up. And there's an exchange between Garibaldi and Sinclair that is just priceless.
Yeah. So, Jim, zip then fasten or fasten then zip?
Fasten and zip.
Okay, folks, go ahead and send your responses in. Which is it for you? I'm fasten and zip too.
Yeah, are we going to talk about
this
socks?
is a question Antonio would ask.
Yeah. Are we going to talk about socks?
We are not going to talk about socks.
We are not going to have that conversation today.
No. That one wouldn't be Antonio. That would be our dog Obi-Wan.
Yeah. That was a great exchange between those two.
Yep. Now we do get a shift back to Delenn's completely. Now, when we say an A story and a B story here, it really is a completely unrelated B story. She's been taken aboard the Minbari cruiser. Why do they have her change in the hallway?
I don't know.
That is one big honking ship. But I will say this.
Yeah.
The Grey Council chamber, on the one hand, it really is a totally cool look.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you got to admit, it is one cheap set.
It wouldn't cost a great deal of money to do that.
Stage black. Yeah, a stage black and a few Fresnels.
Yeah. However, when you say the two storylines are not related, they aren't until the very, very, very end. So we'll talk about that when the time. I just want to make sure that I throw that in.
Nothing, as Jakar had said, nothing is as it appears.
Right. Exactly.
Actually, he's said that several times.
Mm-hmm.
But in the Grey Council, Rothan is back. That's the gentleman with the staff who desired to remain uncredited.
Uh-huh.
And the Grey Council wants to put Delenn in charge.
Yeah. Which to me seems kind of unusual because, if nothing else, her age.
I suspect, remember, Minbari live a bit longer than humans normally.
Well, that's true.
So I suspect she's probably a little bit older than she looks, but one of the things you've gotten an impression, I don't think it's been explicitly stated, but you've got an impression that has a connection to Dukat, their leader.
Yeah.
And as the series goes along, that is actually clarified. She was Dukat's prodigy.
Right. Now, they want Delenn to lead the council.
Mm-hmm.
They have not had a council leader for 10 years?
That apparently is their mourning period.
Wow.
And as Rothan says, I think it was Rothan, or it's either that or Grey Council member number 2 that says the time has passed, it's been too long.
Yeah.
And they want Delenn to take up the leadership of the Minbari people.
Yeah.
Which has a downside. It will leave her there on that cruiser because the Grey Council stays in space.
Mm-hmm.
That will leave her with her home on that cruiser, and she will be gone from Babylon 5.
Yeah. And she does not want to do that. She feels like she has more to accomplish yet.
In particular, in some of the discussion afterwards with Rothen, we keep having this prophecy stuff come up.
Yes.
There appears to be something about this prophecy that she considers extremely important.
That she apparently does, but the rest of the council apparently does not, because Rothen tells her prophecy will take care of itself.
Mm-hmm. Now, I wonder, and I think you bring this up in your notes a little later, how much of this prophecy and the extent of this prophecy is the council really aware of?
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? Apparently, they may know the prophecy, but they may not understand the prophecy completely.
And they may not have had enough information to get all of the details.
Yeah.
Now, I think Rothen probably knows a little bit more than the rest, just because of some of the things he's done and some of his conversations with Delenn.
Well, Delenn seems to be very well aware that she's going to play an important part in something coming up.
Mm-hmm.
And she needs to do it.
Yes, and we're going to find out that it's not just the Grey Council who's wondering whether it's Delenn's ego that's putting her in this role or not, as far as the prophecy is concerned. There's going to be some other significant players that will have doubts and, how shall I put it, will challenge her on this.
Oh, yeah. Big time. One of my favorite episodes, but as you're going to say, yeah, that's a conversation for later.
For another, it's going to be a great conversation, though.
Oh, yes.
So, we're back on Babylon 4 at this point. One of the questions that I've always had here, Babylon 4 had gone operational, right?
Correct.
That means it should have functioning sensors, blah, blah, everything else. And of course, yes, it's within that tachyon bubble, but it still makes me scratch my head. It's like, how were they able to get in there and land completely undetected?
Well, they're undetected. They get on the station, and immediately some joker comes running in with a PPG and starts shooting. And, in light of the attack that's going on with this crewman, I would say probably that there's a lot of things going on this station that have more immediate concern than...
Yeah, those time flashes are affecting everyone.
Yeah. So there's more of a concern there than a proximity alert.
Yep. And you know what? Going along with what you said, Krantz's people do show up there pretty darn quick.
Yeah. Yeah, they
do.
So
yeah, I think you've got a point. You've got a point, and they were real quick to call off Garibaldi. It's like, don't hurt the guy.
Right.
So, yeah, I would say a large part of the crew is rather disjointed from the time flashes.
Yep.
Which answers both that and the rather why the insane attack questions.
Yeah. I am not impressed with Major Krantz.
And why not?
He just seems to be kind of wimpy and weaky and weepy, and he doesn't
and a bit of a stick up the butt.
No, not even that. He's just kind of he's nervous, and a person in charge shouldn't be nervous.
Well, he's not the commander of the station. He's just overseeing the final bit of its construction, of its going online. And I think I can come up with two words that would fairly solidly give meaning to your discomfort with or dislike of him. Military bureaucrat.
Okay.
that really, I mean, he's it's almost like he's a military logistics or engineering bureaucrat.
Yeah.
A military project manager.
Yeah, there you go. I could agree with that. So, in other words, he was probably going to be replaced.
He was absolutely going to be replaced. He was not going to be the commander.
Okay.
Now, he does seem to know about the time jumping.
Yeah.
At least he understands it enough to realize what was going on, because he is able to explain at least what the time flashes were. They were able to figure that much out.
Yeah.
Obviously, the tachyon emissions
Now, do we ever find out how much time has passed from the disappearance of the station to the reappearance of the station? Is it minutes, hours, days?
I get the feeling, and this is kind of borrowing from future knowledge, we're talking hours.
Okay.
It's like a period. I would say less than 24 hours.
And see, that kind of makes me feel like there might be some time inconsistencies in the story, because figuring out these time jumps that everybody is having in a short amount of time, why they're happening, how they're happening, would seem...
Well, they don't figure that out. Krantz and the others don't figure that part out at all.
Mm-hmm.
All they're able to do is figure out that they're having these weird time flashes.
Right.
They've lost contact with the outside, it seems.
Right.
And that's also consistent with what happens in the future. That's a loaded phrase there, isn't it?
Yeah.
But future in a future episode.
Right.
So they know there's something up. They're not even certain what year they're necessarily in. I would say from the kind of readings and stuff that they're able to get, that's not too hard to necessarily too hard to figure out. The way they describe it is, well, they borrow one of Harlan Ellison's phrases that he became famous for. They're unstuck in time.
Yeah.
So their time is progressing in, quote, real time per se, but they're sort of a bubble. They're a bubble of time progressing that's shuffling around in the time stream.
Right.
Itself.
And there's a reason for that we will
And there's a
find
reason
out.
for that.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually makes sense from a physics basis, depending on which space-time models. But we're not a philosophy or physics podcast either. So
sometimes we are. Sometimes we are. When philosophical issues are, shall we say, necessary.
Yep. Which have happened in the past and
Yes.
certainly going to happen again.
Oh, yeah.
Now, we do have one of these time flashes that we were just mumbling over while they're there. And that's kind of important, too. So we're seeing Babylon 5 overrun.
Yeah.
By something that seems to be invisible.
Yeah. And seems to
In
be
fact,
winning.
Seems to be winning, and in fact, it sounds like they're in a bit of a desperate strait. I mean, desperate enough that they're going to blow the station.
Right. So then, stepping out of the show itself, this would suggest to me that they intended to keep Sinclair for the entire run of the series.
That actually has been discussed at points. Remember, at this point, I believe they had already figured out the different directions Sinclair's arc is going to take.
Mm-hmm.
That said, he would have still been in Telza.
Right.
Which meant he would have been in charge of the Rangers.
Mm-hmm.
Which, in the case of this particular battle and the circumstances and everything else, the circumstance of this particular battle, if this battle occurred, the Rangers would have certainly been, it would have been reasonable at least to assume that they were there fighting as well.
Right.
So you can justify his presence there. In other words, I don't think, even if Straczynski had a strong feeling of the changes that were coming, I don't think he would have necessarily felt a need or a compelling desire to change anything in the story.
Mm-hmm.
That's my own theorization.
Right.
Oh, as long as we're off topic of the story.
Okay.
This is actually one of the very, very rare cases of ad-libs taking place.
Oh, okay. Enlighten me.
When Garibaldi is yelling and throwing out you want some, take some of the lines.
Yeah.
As he's blasting away. His script was just, I think it was something like a primal yell that just went on and on.
Okay.
And the director let him get away with the ad-libs on it. They took a little bit of fan heat from it. Not so much heat, but there was a lot of questions. Was this a tip of the hat to aliens? the second Alien movie because of some of the similarities
Okay. I can
when they
see
were
that.
fighting the xenomorphs. But it was strictly an ad lib that if Joe had caught it wouldn't have been allowed, but it still fits. It still fits. Just a little bit of trivia there.
Oh, okay. Neat.
Uh-huh.
Now, back into the story. Delenn is going to upset the Great Council if she does not accept their offer. And
Yeah.
she's warned by Rothan that if you turn this down, you could become outcast.
Yeah, not just eliminated from the Great Council, but outcast in general.
Outcast,
Now, he's
yes.
actually on her side.
Yes.
And he supports her in what she's doing. He's just making sure she really understands the full
Right.
scale and impact of what can happen here.
Right. The strength of her character, though, I think would keep her from becoming outcast, because what happens at the beginning of the next season, if that doesn't make her an outcast, nothing does. Nothing will.
And I wonder if Rothan has some inkling of what she's planning. And part of his comment of outcast is in relation to that, as well as her turning down the council position.
He might, but I don't think anybody really knows exactly what is going to happen.
We'll postpone this part of the conversation for just a few minutes. It is certainly going to come up before the end of the episode again.
Yes.
Just with Rothan's actions.
Mm-hmm.
So let's switch back to Babylon 4 for a while.
Okay.
We meet a new character.
Yeah, Zathras.
Yay.
He's looking for the one. And
Actually, let's let him describe it the best. It is his own words are the only way to introduce Zathras.
Okay.
The one leads us. The one tells us to go. We go. We live for the one. We would die for the one.
All right, so Zathras, what can you say?
Oh, well, he's an interesting character, a strange character. I'm not sure what to, when you first see him, the guy looks like some kind of a wreck.
Yep.
And I think it comes from his reason for being on the station. Apparently, there is some great war taking place, and he is there. Is it too early to say that he is there to steal the station?
No, in fact, he pretty much admits it. What's great about this is we get a good rundown on the history of this great war 1,000 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That is very foreshadowing of the things that are happening in Babylon 5.
Yeah.
Without giving anything away.
Yeah. Because Babylon 4, apparently in this earlier war, is supposed to play a very important part.
A base of operations.
Right. And Babylon 5 is going to play a very important part. So it seems to me that we have portents, yes, I used the pun intentionally, of history repeating itself.
Indeed, very much. It's sort of the cycle of history, and it's more of the cycle of history rather than, the history repeat. I mean, we could go Michael Moorcock and the Eternal Champion.
Yeah.
But we'll be doing that in another episode, actually,
yeah.
Because we do get a visit from Elric.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how many of our younger listeners would even recognize what we just said, though. But, yeah. Zathras' character, though, oh, gosh, back to what you were talking about. We how to put it, his phrases, I can't even call them one-liners.
Yeah.
It's just his phrases are priceless. I mean, math not Zathras' skill.
Right. Part of that is because he refers to himself in the second person all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Though we do get a very important phrase that we will be hearing again many times.
Mm-hmm.
The "we live for the one, we die for the one" phrase.
Right.
Though he describes as we would die for the one.
Yes, and we don't yet know who the one is.
Yeah, we keep getting back to this, the one.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the conversation unfortunately gets interrupted because something is back.
Mm-hmm.
And that something turns out to be a blue spacesuit.
Yeah, person in a blue spacesuit. And
does that suit look familiar?
Yeah, it does. It's right out of the same exact design as 2001: A Space Odyssey.
That's because it is the blue spacesuit that was used in 2010.
Okay, I mean,
They needed a spacesuit, so they grabbed it from the props department. It was an old one.
I remember the first time I watched that episode, it was like, wow, I know where that came from.
It wasn't an intentional tip of the hat. They needed the suit. That's what was in props,
Okay.
They never throw away props. They might destroy sets, but they've got prop archives that go back decades.
Oh yeah.
And that was what they were able to get their hands on.
Yeah.
So
mm-hmm.
Who is the one that they're talking about?
Well, we know who it is, but
now
Zathras identifies the person in the spacesuit as the one.
The one.
Yes.
And he looks at Sinclair and says, the one, when he first meets him, except then he says, not the one.
Right.
But is Sinclair the one? I mean, it's a legit question because, who do we hear showing up at the end of this encounter later on in this episode?
Well, yeah. Well, see, we've got all kinds of things going on here. Sinclair is the one that will be, not the one that is.
No, he's the one that was.
Well, see, now we're talking paradoxic.
Sheridan's the one that will be.
He will be, but first...
Sheridan's the one that will be. Sinclair's the one that was.
Okay, I see where you're coming from.
And then we've got the one... Yeah, I'm actually quoting out of the future, which I guess we were not supposed to do.
Right. The one that is... Okay. Yeah,
now, of course, at that time, they had no idea about Sheridan, so a lot of the debate was, who is this one? Is it Sinclair, which seemed to be the obvious answer? But there was also a question of, well, could that be Delenn? Because she apparently is there, in some respect.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of those, and Straczynski was just downright evil. He fires up all these questions, and people are wondering, when are we going to see this? When are we going to get more answers? Or is there going to be more Zathras? And they wait until the middle of season 3 to give us an answer.
Yeah. He's very good at that.
He's absolutely very good at that. That said, we are going to switch back in the story to the Grey Council.
Mm-hmm.
Delenn is making her case as to why she should not take over the leadership of the Minbari people.
Mm-hmm. And
we get a little bit of insight on the prophecy, because according to Valen, he's the Christ figure, basically.
Yes.
They are not to interfere with humans' destiny. Apparently, he knows something about humanity. He knows something about the people of Earth 1,000 years before the Minbari actually meet them, and seems to see an important role for them.
Yes.
And apparently it's our ability to fight, our ability to persevere against losing odds without giving up faith and hope.
Right.
That is one of the things that makes us so important.
Well, it's our human spirit, and
mm-hmm.
you can understand why they would admire something like that, because we don't give up.
Yep. And what really kind of struck me about this, when she talks about humanity's greatness and walking like giants among the stars, and it almost sounds like she's talking about the next generation of Vorlon.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So, and well, okay, I'm being that there's a little bit of. I actually did kind of get that feeling the first time I saw it, but then we see the season finale for season 4. Think forward.
Oh, I'll tell you what.
Season finale of season 4.
I'm trying to remember.
Deconstruction of falling stars.
You're. I'm drawing a blank.
Where we see the future 10 year, 1 year, 10 years, 100 years,
Oh,
500 years, 1,000 years.
Okay, yes.
A million years.
I tell you what. Now I remember. Yes.
Anyway, okay. Delenn actually very narrowly wins her vote to not become the Minbari leader.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that surprises me most about that is they would have installed her unwillingly if they needed to.
Yeah. I don't know how she would have put up with that.
But again, the risk of becoming outcast raises their head. And as you say about next season, they have no idea.
Yeah.
Just how outcast she's willing to become.
Well, maybe not. Well, we don't know about willing, but does.
Mm-hmm.
Whether she's willing to or not.
So, we're back on Babylon 4.
Yep.
And we're at the one piece that kind of annoyed me.
Yes.
Plastic net gates.
Well, cheaper than chain link fence.
Yeah. I think that was probably what it was. And, rapid, they have to build sets rapidly, so rapid turnaround. But plastic net gates with that mob?
Yeah. It did look kind of silly in hindsight, but you know what? I wasn't really.
It worked. Yeah, it worked for the story. At the time of watching the story, it was no problem.
Yeah, I was focused on the story as opposed to. Yeah.
We get back to Zathras.
Yeah.
He uses the panic and the rush around and the people just not paying too much attention to give something to that blue-suited figure.
Right.
And he explains that it's his time stabilizer.
Right, which I guess allows him to stay in the future.
I think it gives him a link to the time stream. With that time stabilizer, he's not having those time flashes.
Okay.
He's staying relative to where he's hooked to where Babylon 4 is located.
Oh, that makes sense.
And it protects him from the fluctuations, which is necessary to be able to get in and out of there without dying.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, well, yeah. Speaking of, we've talked about Zathras quotes before.
Right.
Here's another one.
Trial. Zathras not of this time. You take, Zathras die. You leave, Zathras die. Either way, it is bad for Zathras.
Yeah. Like I said, only Zathras can say Zathras.
Yeah.
Now, we get another time flash, too, in all of this. Garibaldi has a jump into the past. Sinclair jumped into the future, Garibaldi to the past.
Mm-hmm.
And we get some fill-in on the lease background.
Yeah. We got a foresight into that a few episodes ago.
Mm-hmm.
And now that we're filling in the story there on how they broke up, which probably isn't completely accurate, being that Garibaldi realized that he didn't belong there.
Yeah. It does give a little foreshadowing that, maybe we're not done with this character yet.
Yeah, that's very true.
And that is, I think, a good bit of foreshadowing.
Yes.
So the station is getting ready to leave for the last time. Everyone is clearing out.
Yep.
And, gee, you think there's going to be a little bit of a repair bill before Bab 4 can be used for whatever this base of operations is.
Yeah, if that even matters. They just need that base somewhere. They probably.
But it needs to be functional, and you've got girders and boxes flying and stuff smashing all over the place.
Yeah, it's going to be a mess, that's for sure.
Theoretically, everyone is off the station except Zathras, but it doesn't take long before we realize they're not, and what is this atmosphere is breathable bit?
Yeah, I didn't quite understand that. Is the atmosphere 1,000 years going to be different than the atmosphere? I don't know. Does this person in the blue spacesuit require a different atmosphere? I don't know.
I think your note is probably the best excuse for it. It's an excuse to remove the helmet.
Yeah.
I think you've probably got as much of it that's needed there.
Yeah.
Particularly, well, I was going to say particularly considering the unsuited hand that reaches out after that helmet comes off. But why is Sinclair so much older?
Yeah.
Even with the time stabilizer.
Yeah. Well, it's probably because he's been pulled into the past also, obviously.
Or since he's back there again, it may have something to do with those time flashes and those periodic tachyon bursts.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I have no doubt that we're going to find out in a future episode why.
Yep. And why do we only see Delenn's hand?
Well, are we positive it's Delenn?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And even at the time, Straczynski made it clear. It's like, you've got the hand. It's obviously her voice. I'm not going to lie to you about something like that.
Yeah, you can't.
So
you can't discount that voice at all. I mean, there's nobody else with a voice like that.
So there's clearly some reason. And even back then, at the time, there was a lot of speculation of what kind of change. There's going to be some sort of change in her.
Mm-hmm.
So what is this change? And the other question, I guess, is who are the they that is waiting? If you haven't watched the future seasons yet, like I said, we've done a pretty decent job of keeping away from critical future events here.
Mm-hmm.
She's talking about a they. Well, who is that they? We do get a strong hint of who one of those they probably will be.
Yeah.
At the very end, but.
Mm-hmm. And I have with a question mark, Rangers perhaps are waiting.
Don't know.
Yep.
Well, we know, but other people don't know.
Right.
Of course, if they don't know the answer to this, their question is going to be, well, what are Rangers? But to that, we can only say wait till next season.
Yeah. Do we find out about the Rangers in the second season or the third season?
Yes.
Okay.
Second season, yes, indeed.
I couldn't remember because I kind of landmarked the Rangers mostly in season 3 because of my wife's reaction to Marcus.
Yeah.
That's when she really enjoys the watching the episodes.
Right. Well, in the wrap-up, we actually have 2 wrap-ups to this episode. The first is with Delenn on the Minbari cruiser still with the Grey Council.
Mm-hmm.
And Rothen is really rather optimistic about her return.
Yes.
Much more he's much more optimistic and supportive when he's talking to her as a colleague and a friend outside of the council than when he has to take his role as the mediator of the council.
And he's probably quite relieved that Delenn didn't get ostracized for her decision.
Yeah, well, they're still considering that, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
One thing that makes it real clear the degree of faith and support he has in her is that he gives her one of the triluminaries.
Yes.
That triangular device.
And I understand there are only 3 of those.
Correct.
In existence.
One of them is in the staff, and then there's the one that she has,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's one other that we haven't necessarily heard about.
Yeah. What is she going to do with this triluminary, I wonder?
This goes back to the discussion we had earlier. I think Rothen does have some idea. I don't think he necessarily knows the specific, the exact specific, but I do think he may have some idea.
Well, if it is a prophecy, it would probably be written down somewhere that the triluminary is going to play an important part in the prophecy.
Yep. Again, this is questions that we will be seeing answered as we progress.
But see, then Delenn, who is consumed by this prophecy enough to risk being ostracized by her people, tells Rothan, that she can't accept this, that she shouldn't take this, the Triluminary.
I think that's more of a similarity of when someone gives someone a incredibly valuable, incredibly precious gift.
Yeah.
That's like, oh my gosh, no.
But
I
if
can't
she's
take this.
if she's immersed in this prophecy, shouldn't she know that she needs that?
Probably. Probably. I think I have been in that exact situation as recently as yesterday.
Ah.
So I understand very much where she's coming from on that. So
Okay.
Now, Rothan does leave with a wonderful, wonderful foreshadowing here. I feel a great change in my bones, a new beginning, an end I cannot say. We are surrounded by signs and portents. I feel darkness pressing. If ever you have need of me, I am here.
Mm-hmm.
That's his final comments as she wraps up to leave and return to Babylon 5.
Okay.
So back on the station, we have that wrap up as well.
Yes. And then here's where, and we missed it earlier, I should say. Remember I mentioned that the two episodes kind of come together?
Uh-huh.
Prophecy and so forth and so on, and they do come together in that scene where Delen's hand appears.
Yeah.
So they are totally unrelated storylines.
But the true depth of the come together we don't learn for a while.
Right. Which is a JMS staple for the series.
Yep.
You got to pay attention.
On the station, though, when Sinclair and Ivanova are talking about the whole deal, first of all, she kind of regrets not seeing Bab 4, and she makes it real clear next time it's going to be her that goes.
Right. Garibaldi stays behind and she's going to go.
Which kind of gives us a hint that we aren't necessarily done with Babylon 4 yet.
Oh, no.
If an aged Sinclair and Delen's hand and everything else hasn't given you that hint already.
Yeah, exactly.
This should make it pretty darn clear.
Yeah.
And I like the comparison to the Flying Dutchman.
Yes.
Did it ever make it home?
No.
Nope.
Never did.
Though in this case, I might almost disagree. It may not have made it home, but did make it where it was supposed to be, where it was meant to be.
That is?
Huh?
And that is?
Oh, I'm not going to tell you that. I'm not going to tell you that. But I'll just leave it as that it ended up where it was always meant to be.
Okay.
Oh my. This was definitely a great episode.
It was, yes, and you can completely understand why it was a fan favorite. There was a lot of things to like here. I don't have any real dislikes about the episode.
I had to dig to find any nits to pick on this one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, your plastic fencing on the gates, probably.
You know, the truth is, it didn't even really sink into me until I read one of JMS's comments about that.
Oh, and I didn't think...
He's the one who blew it for me. If he hadn't put my mind on it, I would have never even...
Yeah, and if you hadn't mentioned it in the notes, I would have never even thought about it either. So, who knows? So, if you're listening and you have any ideas or thoughts, listen to the lady at the end of the episode, and she'll let you know where to give us your thoughts on this.
Anything to add?
No. Just, was there some boom today?
No boom today.
There'll probably be some boom tomorrow.
Yep. There's always a boom tomorrow.
Indeed.
Good night, friends.
Podcast terminated. Thank you for listening to the Babylon Project podcast. You can email Raul and Jim at the Babylon Project podcast at gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook at the Babylon Project Podcast. On the internet, we are at babylonprojectpodcast.wordpress.com. To subscribe to the podcast, you can find us on iTunes, or you can subscribe to the RSS feed on the webpage.